Now, I'm a bit embarrassed to say I've been following watch forums for probably almost a decade now. And while I'm happy to say I've severely cut down on it recently, there are a few observations that really still sit with me. And one of the interesting things I've seen over the years consistently is a situation where someone will make a post saying that they've been collecting watches for a number of years and they've accumulated a number of multi-thousand-dollar watches. At this stage, they feel that they've gotten a bit bored with them, and perhaps it's time for them to make the big change, namely to consolidate and move into what people on the forums typically call one of the Holy Trinity, which is a concept on watch forums where certain people feel that Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, and Vacheron represent the best that there is, and the idea that some people feel that at some point in time they need to consolidate their multi-thousand-dollar watches and move on to one of the three. Now, more specifically, it's going to inevitably be a sports watch designed by Gerald Genta in the 70s, which, peculiarly enough, all three have and still market. But to make things easier, let's say it's mostly the Patek Philippe Nautilus. Now, inevitably, you'll get people saying, no, don't do it. It's not good to have just one watch after you're used to many, and others saying that this is a life-changing event and you should do it. So down the road, inevitably, you'll see the big pictorial post with 50 pictures, slight exaggeration, of the guy going to the Patek Philippe dealership, getting wine, getting a bottle of water, pictures of a wife pretending that she's happy with all of this, pictures of the dealer bringing the box and the packaging, pictures of the guy wearing the watch and smiling with the dealer, and basically saying that they feel they've reached the peak, this is their nirvana, and that's it. Inevitably, they'll tend to sell the watch and move back to having a variety of cheaper watches. Now, it got me thinking, why does that seem to happen over and over again? Is it just a natural event that occurs when anyone collects something for a long period of time and they just naturally want to move up the price ladder? And there's something to be said about that, but in actuality, there's actually a lot more to it. And the paper on the left you see is an article. It was actually from 2008, but the author of the article, Vincent Bastien, is a former engineer who moved into the world of business somewhere in the probably 60s. And by the 70s, he had moved up quite a bit, where he was tasked with the goal of trying to transform a bunch of local family-owned businesses by the names of Louis Vuitton and Ferrari and others. And the goal was to transform it from a small, little family business into something much bigger. As most of you know, brands like that are iconic, very expensive, and sometimes even really hard to get into, even if you have the money. And Patek Philippe definitely falls into that category, as do the other brands I mentioned. And the interesting thing is, Vincent Bastien and his colleagues came up with this concept of the luxury strategy. Now, I don't have a background in marketing, but I have enough experience as a consumer to understand that a lot of the things he called for were the polar opposite of what common sense would promote or encourage when you're trying to sell things. And I find it very interesting how you can piece those things together with the typical patterns of someone wanting to get into a high-end brand like Patek Philippe. And to start with, Bastien's, one of his rules is that you should advertise towards people who are not your customer. Namely, in the case of Patek Philippe, their watches are very, very expensive. But Bastien's theory is that you want the people who can't afford them to know that Patek Philippe exists, what their watches look like roughly, and that they're very expensive and somewhat unattainable. So in the back of their mind, that could perhaps be a life goal. So not surprisingly, on the forums where you'll see people talk about, hey, I have a few watches that are worth 1,000, a few thousand. I was wondering maybe if I make the big sacrifice of selling everything off, I'd have just enough to buy one, say, stainless steel Nautilus for 10 or 12,000 or US or whatever the going rate is. And that really was engineered that way. So you know in the back of your mind that it's something that is, at least at face value, unattainable, but if you are involved in this long enough, it becomes a possibility with lots of sacrifice. And lots of sacrifice leads to another element of Bastien's luxury strategy. The idea that buying a true luxury good should be difficult. There should be lots of hoops you have to jump through. From the start, it's going to be very expensive, so it's going to be a financial sacrifice, but it doesn't end there. There are going to be wait lists. There are going to be all sorts of evaluations and chasing the watch to get it in stock, because basically Bastien suggests that you should drastically limit supply. If you drastically limit supply, demand will always be there. And that's sort of what happens, especially with something like a stainless steel Patek Philippe Nautilus, which usually sells for roughly, I believe, the retail price, and discounts are not really common. Moreover, one of the reasons why people who follow this path typically pursue a Nautilus is another element of Bastien's strategy, the idea that you should regularly increase the price of your luxury product because it increases its desirability. It continues to remind the public that, hey, this stuff is expensive. And in that respect, it sort of helps people in the case of the Nautilus, because if Patek Philippe keeps raising the price on the watch, it's going to boost the secondhand values. And that makes it seem like a bit more of a safe purchase if a $10,000 stainless steel watch could ever be defined as a safe purchase. But because the secondhand value, the secondhand market is going to always mimic or follow the retail price, you're going to have a fairly safe bet. So if you do change your mind down the road, and if you time it right before or right after a price increase, you could actually make your money back, or sometimes even a little bit better. It's another little element that shows just how well controlled the purchasing path is for something like that. Now, I realize this video is going on for a bit too long now. Now, Bastien has a whole lot other number of rules that he has, but I'll just leave it with this. So in case anyone's ever been interested, there's a lot more to getting people to buy really, really expensive things, and so what luxury is, and all sorts of other definitions. I do hope some of you found this a bit eye-opening, because I certainly did. And as usual, thanks for watching.